So extremely excited to have this discussion with you. You, of course, are a certified life and mind coach. You've been trained by American psychologist Dr. Patrick Cohn, and you've been doing some tremendous work with the National Cricket Academy as well. So why don't we kick things off, just trying to understand a bit more about what your role as head of education at the NCA entails.
Oh, well, NCA, as you know, is responsible for Indian cricket, development of players related to Indian cricket. And there are a lot of stakeholders in the National Cricket Academy. If we have to cater to the needs of the players, then there are a lot of stakeholders, like I said, the coaches, the strength and conditioning coaches, the physiotherapists. So some of the things that I am responsible for is in developing the coaches, the cricket coaches primarily. Coach development is what I'm looking at. How do I develop coaches into international standards? There are a lot of certification courses that we conduct for the coaches. There are three levels at which they get certified. So that's one of the roles that I am looking at. And also into mental toughness and education, anything related to the development and empowering the cricket community there.
Lovely. And you spoke about mental toughness, and I think a majority of the discussion will revolve around mental toughness. That's a topic that I enjoy a lot. Plus, it's a topic that has a lot of relevance and currency right now. So, Sujith, curious to know, like 20 years back or 25 years back, mental toughness was still a factor, right? You've gone on record saying that a player may have the physical attributes, the ability and the skill, but if that's not complemented by mental toughness, then, that player might not be able to reach the big heights. But now, in today's team setups, we're seeing lots of these physiotherapists. In addition to, of course, physiotherapists, we're seeing these psychologists and psychiatrists, which I don't think was the case back in the day, right? So what has changed? Are people just more aware about the fact that, mental conditioning is as important as some of the other aspects that we look at?
Oh, yeah. So one big thing is the awareness, isn't it? Even though for a sportsman, if they have to reach out to a sports psychologist, a mental toughness coach, it's still kind of a taboo because if somebody is seeking out a sports psychologist, then he needs to check his head out. So that is the kind of negative remarks that people still make. And some of them who really want to reach out to a sports psychologist or some kind of a mental support or help are still not so open. But having said that, the awareness has really risen, and a lot of them still reach out and expect it to be. But then the awareness has risen definitely, and then a lot of them reach out. A lot of them seek the help. A lot of them have seek me out, and they've reached out to me. So yes, I think it's because of the awareness. It's because of generally the sports science has also improved in India compared to the other countries.
And we use the phrase mental toughness. We hear mental fitness a lot these days, right? People earlier, fitness was synonymous with physical fitness. But now when you talk about fitness as an overarching term, right, it includes your physical fitness and it includes mental fitness, which is as important a component. How would you define mental toughness or mental fitness?
Oh, well, see, to be fit in the mind is also how one can deal with the emotions. They can comprehend their thought processes. They can manage themselves under stress and pressure situations. So keeping themselves calm, and basically, if a person can maintain a resourceful state of mind under any circumstance, then he is fit. We all are to a large extent, because we just don't or do things that we think about. You need to have that resolve, you need to have the self-awareness, and you need to be able to manage yourself in a particular way, which is resourceful under the circumstance. So if you can do that, then you're mentally fit. It's the mental well-being. Just like how you compared the physical well-being. When you're physically fit and when there is well-being, then you function optimally physically. I mean, in terms of the actions, in terms of the physical health, you're said to be physically fit when you can go about doing your normal functions of life. Similarly, you need to have the mental capability to comprehend things, respond to stimuli, the environment, which is appropriate and which is effective. So that's what mental fitness is all about.
Understood. And how much of this, according to you, is genetic versus it being cultivated? So nature versus nurture, because some people might be born more mentally fitter compared to others, but is this something one can cultivate as well, through deliberate practice?
Yeah, you said it. See, nature versus nurture has always been a big debate. People are still discussing about it, debating. There is no concrete proof that there's only one thing. There's always a debate and it continues on. My belief is yes, there is a bit of genetics involved in it, because when you talk about physical health, some of it can be congenital. Some of the illnesses that can be passed on, which is genetic, right? Physical health and well-being is genetic. If your father, your parents have some kind of a physical illness, you're prone to get it. I think to a large extent, we've also seen that mental illness, when it comes to illness, it is not mental toughness or weakness, it is illness. So some of them have passed on to the next generation. If they have some mental illness, then you see that there is a high probability that the next generation you can pass it on. So that's a different conversation altogether. But when we talk about the mental toughness, it is something that got to do with the conditioning, the nurture part of it, right? So it can be definitely cultivated, is what I can say. If you really like the way you go to the gym and work out and get physically fit, if you can exercise muscles of your mind, then you can also become mentally fit.
Understood. And you spoke about, how a big part of mental toughness is actually people being able to control their emotions, right? Regardless of the predicament that they're facing, regardless of the situation that they are in, right? I read something by this American author called Ryan, his name is Ryan Holiday, and he spoke about how, being mentally tough doesn't necessarily mean stifling your emotions. You still let the emotions rise up, but it's about domesticating them. It's about taming them, as opposed to preventing them. So would you agree with that concept?
Absolutely. We are at the end of the day, we are humans, right? So emotions are a part of life. If you look at a lot of great performers, emotions have made them become great performers. They've known how to harness the emotions to their benefit. So that's what it is all about. But at the same time, if they don't know how to harness their emotions, it can break them as well. So that is what makes a person mentally fit. If he or she knows how to harness their emotions, constrain them or restrict them to the needs of the situation.
Lovely. We spoke a bit about what mental toughness means, and you also spoke about how this is something that can be cultivated. Of course, there's an aspect that's genetic, but at the same time, just like you go to the gym and you build your physical muscles, you can also build the muscles of your mind, as you said beautifully. So how can one, there might not be like a straightforward easy answer to this, but how can one deliberately cultivate mental toughness? What are some of the daily practices that people can do, athletes as well as perhaps non-athletes?
See, I think one of the most important aspects of mental toughness is the kind of self-talk that keeps going on in our head. There's always something that chatter goes on in our head. So one way to check our own self-talk, what's going on in our head? Is it predominantly negative? Are we undermining ourselves all the time? How are we reading the situation? How are we representing it to ourselves? So we represent every situation, every person we meet, or every situation that we are exposed to. We represent it to ourselves by our self-talk. Oh, this is dangerous. This is something that I don't like. We keep judging everything. And how we perceive these situations and people will be something that we need to constantly work on. How do we represent it? How do we talk to ourselves about it? So if, first of all, the first thing is to be self-aware. A lot of us are not even aware of what conversations are going on in our own head. So the first step is to really, that's why, people talk about meditation. What is meditation? Meditation is just going inward, kind of focusing on our thoughts, focusing on our breath. And as the thoughts come in, instead of judging them, you just have to just observe them without having to attach good, bad, right, wrong to it. So if you do that in a normal day, there are thousands of thoughts that are coming to our head. if we can just start observing them rather than being given by the thoughts. I mean, when I say being given by the thoughts, if you have some negative thoughts, your emotions are also going to be altered, and it will be in conjunction with what you think. Thoughts leads to your. If you're aware that your thoughts are leading to your feelings, and then you can actually, when you rationalize those thoughts, you can keep a check. You can subordinate some of the thoughts, taking you away from your resourceful state. So this is something that, as a practice, if everybody does, then they can manage themselves and manage their emotional well-being and mental well-being.
And Sujith, don't mince your words when you answer this question, but why aren't more people doing this? Because if I'm thinking about this, right, it sounds very simple on paper. Observe your thoughts, just do nothing, just think about, what the self-talk is in your mind, right? Do you think right now we're just being bombarded with way too many distractions that people have actually lost the art or lost how to practice, self-awareness, practice meditation, practice thinking, right? Because as paradoxical as it is, meditation, as you said, is the art of doing nothing in a way, right? You're just thinking, right? You're just observing your thoughts. It sounds very simple on paper, but still, given the distraction that people have, people find it hard to even, observe their breath or observe their thoughts for even 5 minutes, So how can people develop the patience and, avoid distractions such that they can actually indulge in this practice that you spoke about?
Yeah, so good question you asked, and you also answered it, because nowadays we are getting a lot of stimuli, right? Because of that, your mind is constantly bombarded with a lot of distractions, and it becomes very difficult. Like when I was talking to my son, they constantly need some kind of a stimuli because they're used to it. They want to be on a laptop, they want to be on some screen, they want to gadgets around. The stimuli is unbelievably increasing day by day, because of which your mind constantly is bombarded with thoughts and feelings, and it becomes very difficult unless you train yourself, unless you discipline yourself, right? If you want to have a fit body, you just can't have a fit, strong body. You need to work on it. Like, everyone wants to be fit, everyone wants to have a great body, they want to have a six-pack, but does everyone have it? No. Who are the ones who have it? Who have the discipline to go and work out? No, and none of us like to go and spend so many hours training yourself in the gym. But some of them who can do it will get the benefit. And similarly, mind is the exact same thing. Just because you think you're physically fit and you have a six-pack, you will not get a six-pack. You need to put in the yards. And similarly, you've got to really train yourself. And sitting silently and meditating, focusing on your breath, is as difficult as pumping iron in the gym. So you need to discipline yourself. You need to take a little time out and practice it. It's just not something that, okay, now you know how to be mentally tough. Hey, you're getting those negative thoughts, so all you have to do is just stop it. No, it doesn't happen, right? It can only happen when you mindfully, constantly keep focusing on it, constantly discipline yourself to do the necessary things to get to a stage where you can become an expert at it. How can you just keep observing? Because that's not something that comes natural to us. You need to really work.
When the people start with 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, then slowly but surely, build their way up.
Very good. Yes. So more importantly, you set a goal, and if you're not able to achieve it, even if it is a small manageable goal, stop judging and saying to yourself, again, the self-talk that, oh God, even a small thing I can't accomplish. If that is the thought that you're going to encourage, self-talk that you're going to encourage, then you're going to get demotivated. So another bigger term, again, that I want to introduce is, first of all, we need to start learning how to accept the way we are and the way we are not. Everything stems from that. When I say accept, it doesn't mean you don't do anything about it, but just be. And then when you are at peace with that, when you're at home with whatever the situation that you are in, whatever that you cannot do or you can do, then you can decide that you can do something about it. So when you fail to accomplish something that you have set for yourself, if you are at home with it, then it's more likely that you will get back to the habit quicker. Instead of, if you start self-critiquing yourself, you don't want to attempt something, and again, if you think that you're going to fail, you don't want the feeling of criticism. That's why you don't want to get to it. But if you make it okay to fail and okay to not do something, then the chances are that you will continue to do it. You will get back to it, and hopefully then you will continue to build that habit.
And just to rephrase or perhaps clarify everything that you're saying. So even if, say, I have a habit that I'm not too proud of, right? So you're saying instead of actually indulging in negative self-talk, instead of calling myself a failure, instead of saying that, you know what, I'm never going to change, accept the way things are. But at the same time, you're saying do not become complacent. Acceptance here doesn't mean you're not going to do anything about it, right? Accept how the situation is right now. But at the same time, telling yourself that, you know what, yes, I can rectify the situation, even though I may not have been able to do so yet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Acceptance is just like you rightly said, yes, everybody fail. I can fail too, but I can always get up, and that's how we learn to walk. Imagine a baby is resigned about the fact that he is not able to walk. He would never try again. Thank God for the fact that we were not so cognitively developed. Otherwise, babies would never walk because constantly criticizing themselves. Our brains are not as developed. So we need to learn many times to stop our judgments and just accept as is the factual part of it. If I didn't do something, what does it mean? It just means I didn't do it. It doesn't mean I'm a failure. It doesn't mean that I'm incapable. So all those meanings are what will most often than not put us down. Those meanings are nothing but the self-talk that I'm talking about. You just keep it as a fact. If you do something, it's still a fact. Yes, if you attach a positive meaning to it and it gives you the motivation, well and good. But if you don't do something and if you attach a meaning to it, which is a negative meaning, then you should stop it. You just need to examine the fact just as is. You failed means you failed. Doesn't mean anything else.
The other detrimental impact of negative self-talk would be that if you're constantly calling yourself a failure, constantly calling yourself someone who cannot achieve this, then I think you start believing that because it becomes a part of your identity. You never want to identify yourself as a failure. And then your self-esteem also hits rock bottom, and self-esteem in many ways the reputation that you have with yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, so in our field we call those labels. So we put some labels to ourselves. Like if you go back to your school days, there are some subjects that you really don't like,
right?
Or you're fearing. The most common thing is mathematics, but I don't know. It could be anything else as well. So if you failed and when you label yourself called that I'm really not good at maths, I'm not good with numbers, I suck at maths, and that's the label you put for yourself, then you would, it's self-fulfilling prophecy, something else is a term that's used, and then you constantly keep looking for evidence to suit the label. The same thing is a positive label. If you're good at some subject, you have labeled yourself that you're good. And when you label yourself that you're good, not that you don't fail at it, but when you fail at it, you don't recognize it. You don't just attach it to yourself. You'll only keep looking at the evidence that tells you that you're good at it. So labeling is something that is also another area where we need to keep breaking that labels and developing better labels for yourselves.
And Sujith, you of course shared the dressing room with the likes of Anil Kumble, Sachin Tendulkar, Saurav Ganguly, Rahul Dravid, right? Everyone knows they had the skill, right? They had the ability, but it wasn't just the ability and the skill, right, that made them the players that they were. It was the mental toughness, the grit that they had. You've also said that Anil Kumble had the focus and the determination, right, which made him the player that he actually was, right? So talk to me a bit more about what was it different about these players, that made them a cut above the rest.
Yeah, like you rightly said, they have some characters. There is something called the X factor that they bring in with themselves. So if you look at how Anil Kumble, because you mentioned Anil as a person, he's relentless. That's his nature. He's persistent. So he never gives up. So even if you look at his bowling, he is persistently hitting the same place, attacking the stumps all the time. same length. If the batsman makes mistake, you miss, I hit. So he's persistent, and that's the expect. He never gives up, and that's the attitude which made him really, really very successful. If you talk about Saurav Ganguly, his X factor is his self-belief. No matter, I mean, that's one of the biggest things that most of us as human beings suffer. What will people think about? And that's the self-esteem that you talked about a little while ago. But self-esteem and the self-confidence that Saurav Ganguly has, I have not seen anyone else has as much as he has, because it was tested constantly. I mean, he was dropped, people wrote him off, but he never lost that belief in himself, and he would always make a comeback. And that's the X factor that he had. I don't know how some people do it. Is it the nature or the nurture? We don't know how. But then he had it. He never lost it. Even if people around you write you off, but he would not listen to them. He would not agree to them. And he would not let the society to dictate who he is. We call that the social mirror. The society is not a mirror to tell him who he is. He would define to himself who he is, right? So we all know that. So that is the ability that he had, and Saurav Ganguly. That's why, with whatever the skill and talent that he had, he could use it to the best of his ability, and he was a great leader because he always came with that self-belief. Rahul Dravid again, he again brings in that determination and focus. Patience is his virtue, right? He had that kind of patience. He had that kind of calmness to the things that he dealt with, and he had this innate ability to just focus on what needs to be focused on, even though there were failures and other things. And one other very important thing that Rahul had was that his work ethic was next to none. You know, people, when I say work ethic, people work hard when there is a lot of motivation. There's a lot of external motivation and rewards, and that's what keeps them going. But there are some people like Rahul who will not require any rewards, recognitions externally for them to continue to do. They're self-motivated. That self-drive is something that Rahul had, and that's why he reached the heights that he reached.
Yes, Sachin as well, a combination of all the qualities that you mentioned.
No, Sachin, when I played with Sachin, I could somehow, if you watch the movie Men in Black, there were these aliens in disguise as humans around. When I watched that movie, the first person that I could think of is, hey, is Sachin one of them? You know, he could just do anything, and he was born to play cricket. However, what made Sachin who he is not just that many people think that he was born talented, skillful, but his work ethic, his passion, his relentless passion, and passion to really contribute wherever he was. He wanted to really contribute to the team, to the situation, and that drove him, and that was the motivating factor for him. The sheer passion of doing it for the team, achieving greatness, and that's the pleasure that he found, and he derived. Sheer passion is what I can say Sachin had, for single-minded passion for the game.
Different superstars showcase their mental toughness, their passion, their grit in different ways, right? Because if you look at someone like a Sachin Tendulkar, right, you would perhaps associate restraint with him, right? Even if the Glenn McGraths and the Steves of the world, right, are sledging him, are trying to get inside his head, he still won't be rattled, right? Whereas if you look at someone like a Virat Kohli, he's going to play fire with fire because that brings the best out of him, right? So I'm guessing different champions react differently to different situations.
Yeah, that leads us to a different chapter altogether. That is human personality traits, right? So all of us are different. So if you ask me again, is it the nature or the nurture? It's a combination of it. When we are born, it's not written on a leg or hand on a palm that this person is extrovert, or this person is introverted, or this person is short-tempered, or this person is patient. No. Somewhere I think it's also the conditioning that happens around us. So we all have personality traits in us, but some of us are very expressive. Some of us are very inward, very calm and restrained. So these are all personality traits that we all have, and we are all very different. That's what makes human behavior. And when I talk about personality traits, I would like to restrict it to the behavioral tendencies. Each one behaves differently to the same stimulus. Some of us really exclaim. If you look at some of the people around you, they always talk and they use their hands like the way I'm using. They're very expressive. They have facial expressions, but some of them will have a poker face. If they talk about the same thing. So that is what makes humans different. So if a Virat is very expressive, if he is a go-getter, and if he is aggressive, he displays it that way. It's the behavioral tendency. How David is aggressive, but his aggressiveness is not displayed. He maybe has a poker face. He's restrained, like the way you mentioned. It's a human trait, and it's just that. We don't want to attach values to it. Like if somebody is restrained, his values are higher, and if somebody expresses his emotions, his values are lesser. I think it's wrong for us to attach values to the way people behave. But it's just that it's a behavioral tendencies.
Yes, as long as you're being authentic, as long as you're being true to yourself, right? Because if I think of the word tough, oftentimes people might think that, okay, toughness necessarily means being vocal, being expressive, being aggressive, right? But toughness can be perhaps being calm as well when everyone around you is losing their heads, right? And you might not necessarily showcase your feelings and your emotions. You might remain calm. That could also be toughness, as opposed to, being vocal all the time.
Absolutely. Also, to cry when it in front of people is also, you need to have the courage to do that. And when you ask a question to me, and if I don't know the answer, if I say I don't know, that also is toughness. I mean, you need to have that belief to say, and the character and the resolve to do it. You put it really well. Toughness is something that lets a person deal with the situation without losing it, without getting overawed by the situation. However they know how to deal with it, and that is toughness, and dealing with it in a very effective manner.
Exactly. The likes of Marcus Piscotti, Jonathan Trott, and Glenn Maxwell as well recently have spoken about suffering from ill mental health during their playing days. There's a lot of pressure that playing at the international level entails, especially when you're playing when millions or billions perhaps are watching. You have the weight of expectations of the entire country, right? So definitely takes a toll in you, regardless of how strong your mental fortitude is, right? So of course this is natural, and there's no one size fits all approach to preventing this from happening, right? But what can athletes, what can players who are playing at the elite level do to prevent such instances of mental ill health?
Look, I think, this is a difficult topic to talk about. We need to first put things in perspective, right? So, like I earlier mentioned, mental illness is not the same as weakness, mentally tough or mentally weak. It's two completely different things. Like illness is something like, let's say you have diabetes, right? So you don't have any control over it, because it's the internal juices. It's got to do with the insulin production and all of that. And if I say to a diabetic, come on, be strong and deal with it, so you don't worry about it. But you can't, unless it takes medicine, you can't treat it. Similarly, there are conditions of the mind where there is some lack of serotonin, a combination of things. I'm really not versed with it. So put psychology and psychiatry are two different things. So sometimes mental illness will have to be treated. There has to be attention to it. They have to take some medication to deal with the mental illness, because it becomes another extreme. Anxiety and depression can go hand in hand many times. When all of us are attacked with anxiety, especially when we are facing a big event, a big moment, before facing any big moment, all of us are going to become anxious. And that's the design of human brain. It's the fight or the flight kind of a mechanism that the brain, because if you're not becoming well prepared to deal with some kind of a stimulus with a big moment, there is no survival. So that's the reptilian brain, which will make you a lot more alert. You're going to get a lot of blood flow, and it makes you aroused. So it's anxiety and arousals are all something that we can talk about. So if you're not getting into an arousal state of mind when there is a threat, then you will probably not survive. So that's a very natural state of being. So to answer the question of what people can do is, see, one of the things that I want to bring into perspective is when you over signify or give too much of an importance to anything, then you're losing perspective. Like if you make performance be all and end all, if a Marcus Trescothick puts so much significance on he has to do well, I have to perform, I have to be the best, or XYZ, and I should not fail, then you're leading to trouble, right? Because then you become very anxious. What if I do? Because you're making it too significant. You're making the result too significant. You're attaching the result to your self-worth. If I don't attain it, if I don't achieve it, then I'm a loser. I'm not. So when you start attaching this, then it'll lead to over anxiety, fear of failure, all of that at the mental toughness level. Of course, if it is a physical condition and an illness, this over a period of time can lead to that, or I don't know whether it is also again because of the physical illness. But if you ask, for the question that you asked, only a few of them might have these conditions, but the rest of us, how do you deal with anxiety is just this: focus, get your perspectives right. At the end of the day, it's just a game. It's just a game. There are a lot of other important issues and aspects in life. And how can I focus on some of the positive, some of the good things that are there in life? Just because I failed doesn't mean I'm a failure forever. It's just that I failed this time. And what does it mean? It means nothing, but I just failed this time. Now, those kind of perspectives is something that we need to bring in. So that is one. We need to build that. As coaches, as support staff, and people around will have to create those kind of environments where it's okay to fail. It's okay to be mediocre. It's okay to be ordinary at times. So that's the kind of standards that especially people who overemphasize on performance, we need to create this, right? And so that I think that's what you asked, and so this is the kind of work that we do. That we kind of, even in cases of mental illness, what's the treatment? Like a Trescothick. See, if you look at Marcus Trescothick and some of the Maxwell and some of the other guys that you mentioned, they all have, they're all, I think, taking medication. It's just not the case of mental weakness. It's not a weakness. It's a, so just like anybody else in the team, they would have got anxious as well before a match. They would also get very anxious. But it so happens sometimes that it's not in their control, that they're just not able to restrain it or subordinate those kind of anxiety feelings and all that. So even if a mental toughness coach was next to them, and if he would tell them XYZ, hey, do this, do that, do this, but if their physiology doesn't support it with the kind of physical requirements in terms of the serotonin or the melatonin, and if they have no control over it, then you can't help.